It's
It
so
is really
weird.
weird.
It's so
so fun, but it is weird. Like, I was playing it like, this is trippy as shit.
Hello, I'm Jamie,
I'm Charlie.
and today we are reviewing a game called Control. For those people that don't know, it's a third-person action-adventure title developed by Remedy Games, responsible for Max Payne 1 and 2, for two of my favourite games of all time in Alan Wake and Alan Wake American Nightmare.
So we both just recently played the game. I think we both recently maxed it, not
Yeah.
to boast too much. But we thought we'd talk about it today because we just both really enjoyed it, and it was quite a surprise one, I think, for both of us. Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily expecting anything out of it, but I had a great time. And we thought we'd just kind of go through the gameplay, the story elements, the visuals, the style, aesthetic, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, and just reach a conclusion about what we thought. So yeah, the game is an action-adventure, kind of takes place in a massive, big government building in New York as one of the control agency, I believe. The general consensus online and review-wise was just that it was a really good game, kind of a hidden gem, and it kind of didn't have a lot of marketing or fanfare, from what I remember.
Yeah, I didn't notice too much about it, to be fair. It was one of those games that was on Games Pass for me, and obviously I heard good things, so I just picked it up.
I borrowed it off our wonderful colleague Milo back
Shout
in
out,
February.
shout out.
To the big up Milo,
Big up Milo, the video.
Alright, so first things first, we wanted to talk about the story of the game in Control, which is probably the weakest aspect.
I
feel
certainly
like.
would say so. I feel like we're probably going to get, well, I'm certainly going to get panned by people who really enjoyed the game, and because Remedy are normally all about the story, but it sort of just throws you in at the deep end without much exposition.
Like, basically the premise is that you're playing as this woman who comes into the building and she's looking for her brother, which went missing. He went missing like 17 years ago, and they were both playing with this projector, and they basically released like these hiss creatures from this other psychological realm accidentally through an object of power. Essentially, the hiss is like a mind-controlling sort of leak out from another realm that started taking over like officials and people that work in this government building. Basically, the whole idea of the game is that it switches between a psychological realm and like reality, and you kind of don't know which one's which, and the two just kind of blur together. And I thought that was a really interesting concept to start the game off with. But the actual narrative itself, I think for me personally, just gets a little bit confusing. Like, at the start, I was playing through the first few missions, and I was like, I literally have no idea what's
Same
going
here.
on at all. And she was like, I need to look to the director inside of this building on this floor. And I was like, what? So it starts off very confusing and difficult to get into, I would say. It's probably my biggest criticism of the story.
The story, just generally as well, relies on, like a lot of it relies on collectibles, which is a strange way to go.
And obviously, like, that's a common thing for video games. Like, if you want to look at the lore or like extra contextual information, it's usually just in collectibles in games. But in this one, a lot of the actual narrative plot points are kind of fed through that rather than just showing you on screen or being a little bit clearer. Also, we have to talk about the ending.
The ending. There wasn't much of an ending, if I'm being honest.
The fight scene itself that accompanies the ending is pretty cool. You're going up these big sort of blocks up around the score in the centre, and you're constantly fighting waves of enemies. But then at the end, you're like, oh, something really cool is going to happen, and then.
To be honest.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Obviously, they have to leave it open-ended at the end to kind of allow you to keep playing the game in a way that makes sense. Like, you don't want a complete ending, and then you're just like, why am I still here? But one positive I would say about the story is because of the looseness of it, it kind of gives them the excuse to just literally like do anything. Like, there are so many left field moments in this game. Like, there's a bit with an endless maze with this weird guitar.
Yep.
There are these weird twisting rooms and these like bridges that appear outside, like endless corridors and things like that. Like,
Some
there's
of the
loads
side
of weird
missions where you go in a mirror and you fight a doppelganger version of yourself. It is very left field.
Yeah, there's a bit inside a fridge
Yeah.
that you fight. There's like you fight a giant anchor, and I think all of these weird things that don't actually seem like they'd be a thing in a game that looks quite conventional and like realistic at the beginning. And I think because the story is so sort of like whimsical, it allows it to just do what it wants. That just makes it fun. Like, as a game, it is just so much fun. Like, it's not like Red Dead 2, like the story.
Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about the gameplay in Control, which is, I feel like, the core positive of the game. Like, it's the best part about it.
Definitely.
And it's just what works the best. To move around, you get these control points, which basically act like save points, similar to, I know it's a meme, but like Dark Souls, the kind of thing where you have a save point you can constantly come back to. And they also act as fast travel points around the map, so you can move around easily and quickly. Also, there's like quite a standard progression system that kind of works like the further you get into the game, the more ability points you gain, the more new upgrades you can get for both new weapons, new personal mods, customizable mods for the game, the whole what you'd expect. There's also a skill tree where you can just upgrade things as you go. It's very standard, it's like nothing too surprising, and you'll feel pretty familiar with it straight away.
And if you have played Remedy games as well, you'll know that they're not particularly harsh with the difficulty. Once you level up your character, you're pretty OP.
Probably the biggest thing about the gameplay and the biggest sort of gimmick for me is the objects of power.
The objects of power are just essentially random objects, like could be this cup, that's been corrupted by the hiss and need to be cleansed by your character. And then once you cleanse it, you will unlock a power. So for instance, there's a launch power, which is my go-to.
Yeah, I used that the whole game. Like you just pick stuff up like with your hands, like telepathically, and then you just
Luke Skywalker
fling it.
style. Yeah. I literally upgraded that to the point where it required no sort of cooldown time with the energy bar. So I was just spamming any object in any room, and like everything was trashed all the time. Other powers, you have a shield.
Yep, now that is with similar objects, like you kind of move them up around you, like a big shield. You can also possess enemies, so cool you can kind of move around and then slowly they'll like obviously turn to fight for you, which is really useful later in the game because there are a couple enemies towards the end, like in standard waves that come around the map when you're moving around, and they're so annoying. But you can kind of possess a couple of the lower rank soldiers or whatever to fight for you, which is just really useful. You also unlock flying, which is its own ability in itself, which becomes basically like a core part of the game.
How did I miss that?
Once you're flying and picking stuff up, it's such a nice kind of combination, and it's just such a good loop for me that I just was literally just flying around, shooting stuff.
It adds so much like levelation to like the battles as well, because like you're taking damage, you fly up in the corner, you can land on like a little ledge somewhere and like get your health back, shoot something down.
And what is really nice, once you've upgraded everything and you've got all the abilities, that you can then move on to side missions, which there are a lot of outside of the main story, and sometimes have the best actual experiences in the whole game. There's an entire section called the Pit, which is in the middle of the map, and basically you go down this giant elevator, and then you end up in this very Last of Us looking area with these zombies, with this mold that you have to get rid of.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And it kind of ends with this weird three-headed mold plant
Yeah.
in this room. And it's just such a cool section.
And it meshes with the main story anyway, a lot of it. Like it doesn't feel like you're departing from like doing something that would be more fun.
The main criticism I have of the gameplay though is probably its confusing map. Like, not the worst map I've ever used, like probably the worst one of recent memory is the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order map.
Oh my god, there we go.
Which was honestly horrific. It's not that bad. When you open it, you kind of struggle. I did a little bit to understand what level of a section I was on, because most sections have numerous sort of flaws to them, and the map doesn't really distinguish between the lower ones and the upper ones, so you're kind of in one area that looks like you're in another area. How do I get out of here? So apart from the confusing map system, the gameplay overall is probably the best part of the game, and it's just so much fun, so entertaining.
So fluid.
Yeah, great bosses, great battles, imaginative scenes.
Also, you don't need to reload your weapons.
Yeah, that's true. So none of that press square, mash it, like, no, you're good.
Now we are going to talk about the visuals in the game, and I feel like this is another one of the game's like saving graces. It's like a really, really good looking game. It has like a really cool sort of unique oily aspect to a lot of the aesthetics in the environment.
It's definitely unique. Like, I haven't really played a game with this kind of visual element to it before, and it's very polished, like just very smooth all the way through. Because it starts off quite mundane looking, and then the further you get into the game, the more kind of colours come out, the more sort of red oiliness appears. Just these kind of environments sort of begin to twist and like turn, and it gets really cool.
Like becomes more powerful as you delve into each section.
So the hiss, obviously in the game, the main enemy, their kind of whole thing is that they take over people's minds, and then the person becomes the host of the hiss, basically. And then as the game goes, those designs become much more varied, and they kind of get more and more creative as the game goes. I think, to be honest, I would have preferred a couple more variations of enemies throughout the game.
Yeah, I agree.
There's these kind of giant orbs as well that are just sort of like remnants of the psychological realm.
So annoying. I don't want any more of them.
Yeah,
They are
kind of
so
like
annoying.
jittery, they're kind of just these jittery black orbs, and they kind of just move around, but you can't attack them.
No, you take one hit and they literally disappear across the map, and you're looking around and they're healing everything else while they're like hidden in a corner behind a sofa, and you're like, oh my god.
But they look amazing.
They suck
They
so
suck.
bad as well.
They suck to play. Like, they're an annoyance, but they look amazing.
Yeah, they do. It's just annoying that once the game is finished and you go back to traverse that area for things that you actually need, they're still there. They're still there.
And the cutscenes all look fantastic. The facial animations look great. Voice acting's done very well as well. It's all just top notch, really. Like top stellar production throughout. The only criticism I'd have of it, the kind of undercurrent of the game is always kind of this office, mundane,
security,
security
maintenance.
A lot of it is just very similar looking corridors, very similar like office, studies, computers, desks and stuff. I would have liked a couple more of the floors in the building to be a little bit more, just a little bit more going on.
Yeah.
Like when things aren't kicking off.
That scene, like you were saying earlier, where the walls are shifting in that maze and stuff like that took everyone by like such surprise. I thought I'd want a few more of these moments in it.
So overall, I would give the game a solid 4 out of 5. It's probably the most 4 out of 5 game I think I could ever play. It's got great, smooth gameplay. Like, it looks fantastic. Environments are great. A little more variation would have been good, but like overall, like just really fun, really arcadey kind of game. Just great entertainment the whole time. The story is intriguing and it is fresh, but it is just too confusing. and I think it needs to be better paced and less reliant on collectibles and lore. The rest of the game is really entertaining. It looks amazing. I mean, I platinumed it, maxed it, so I mean that shows how much I enjoyed it.
Ego flex. Ego flex.
You know, I platinumed it.
I platinumed it. It was
No, it's
nasty.
not a big scene, you know what I'm saying?
I would go with a 4 out of 5 as well for this game. I really love Remedy. Every time they come out with something, I'm all over it. Yeah, for me, it was just the story again was a little bit lacking. Like you say, I would have liked it to have more focus in there. A little bit more of the fog.
Yeah.
When we're talking like Alan Wake and games like that, like the story is just so good. And this one isn't. But like you say, the gameplay is super fluid. It's a game that you can just hop straight into, you know, go and clear out like waves and waves of enemies in like cool, unique ways. But yes, I would also give it a 4 out of 5.
Yeah. What a nice conclusion. Everyone. Just all in agreement. We all just love
He's
it.
drunk. He's drunk.
We all just
Let's go
love
play
it.
Control.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you very much.
Let us know what you thought about the game. Hit subscribe, like, you know what to do, all that good stuff, and visit us on thread.com.
Do it.
Do it now. Control it. You know what I'm saying?
Control it.
Let us know, guys, if you've got any other games you think we should give a look at or share our opinions with.
But we want some more games that we can max because everything's just so easy.
Bro, we're so good, man. It's not even hard for it, you know what I'm saying?
Not even a thing.
Not even.